Scorn is a deceptively difficult game for me to critique. On the surface, it's a grimy biotechnological horror game with fleshy graphics and dark ambient music. You shoot weird bio guns, you solve puzzles, you see a ton of crazy stuff. Nothing too over the top, am I right? Well, as you can assume, it's not that simple, in my eyes anyway. The more I look at Scorn, the further I dive into the purpose surrounding its gameplay mechanics and systems, the more mystified I get toward how I can successfully and constructively critique it. It's not a game that's immune to criticism by any stretch, really nothing is, but unless you have the right blueprints, you can't construct anything. And isn't that the whole goal of critique? Providing feedback to make something better? Well, as I said, this one isn't as easy as I'd like. With so many moving parts powering it, Scorn is a confusing piece of artistry, because ultimately, it doesn't say what it wants to be. There's been a sort of philosophical wave in YouTube critique lately where people are trying to understand what a game is saying, its messaging, its meaning. That thirst for understanding has, for better or worse, grown significantly as this YouTube criticism scene has caught on. With Scorn, though, I'm not really searching for some transcendental meaning behind its world, characters, or themes. Instead, I want to know about something a bit less cognitive and a bit more empirical. What is this game's true ideal? What does it ultimately want to be? I won't lie, I rolled my eyes a bit when saying that last line out loud. Melodramatic narration aside, I can say that Scorn's design decisions are fascinating to me, and I'd like to critique them thoroughly. I want to understand how the pencil can be sharpened, what kind of form Scorn can take to fulfill its potential as an artistic artifact. My initiative for this video is to figure out how to articulate this game's issues and ideally guide my critique toward a stronger end result. But hopefully, as I continue throughout, that you begin to understand how tough that turned out to be. Full spoilers for Scorn moving forward. Scorn's most noticeable attribute is, without question, its presentation. The mixture of biological and mechanical components has drawn rampant comparisons to the work of H.R. Giger and, more on point, Krzysztof Beksinski. It's a dark and grimy aesthetic that I've never seen before in a game of this style, and one that's definitely earned appreciation throughout its development. To some, it's nauseating in its detail, as fleshy bodies pile up to the corridor ceilings and miasmic debris drifts atop the winds of the wasteland. It doesn't hurt that the dark, chasmic soundtrack richly seasons the ambient brew of its presentation, enlisting the work of Bosnian sound designer Athek and Welsh composer Lustmord for the OST, with the latter having collaborated with members of Tool, Godflesh, and Swans in his past work. The weight of Scorn's world is plastered with droning industrial moans, contributing to its endless feeling of bleak, hopeless discomfort. While the soundtrack isn't in your face at all, it does its part without a trace of hindrance. It really does go without saying that Scorn has a presentation like no other, and even when you feel uneasy from its blood-splattered focus, it is tough to close your eyes or plug your ears. It's a brooding nightmare that tightly secures itself to the world, never letting go. But this nightmare's cloak hides some pretty surprising bits when it comes to gameplay. Despite the perceptions leading up to its release, Scorn adopts several compelling moments from classic puzzle adventure games like Myst of all things. It sounds strange at first, but in retrospect they're a fantastic way for the player to immerse themselves in a perpetually unsettling world. Learning more about how the universe of Scorn functions while also having it be so grotesque makes for a great juxtaposition. Things get off on the right foot, as the decision on how to dissect a trapped NPC to progress with their arm as a key item is a unique point of interest early on. The giant crater queen and the labyrinth surrounding it are a real standout, as the player must find the correct terminals and activate the transport to escape and move on to the next area, all with enemies scattered about the paths. The last hour of the game is an excellent string of memorable moments, including the surgical removal of the parasite and the neural mind link segment. Scorn is at its best with these moment-to-moment set pieces, as there are plenty of punctuated bits that can drive players forward and capture their engagement. And the ending, while lacking concrete resolution, does have incredible tact in its mournfulness, a grim and outright depressing finale that's difficult to forget. That being said, not many puzzles take advantage of this world-to-player dynamic, as you're more likely to see standard switch puzzles and key-coded doors over using the disturbing world to the player's advantage. Rotating power nodes to earn a key, or just getting the right code to open a locked door, They just don't have a ton of complexity and make for progression that feels artificial in structure. I've said it before, but simply hitting a switch and opening a door to move forward instead of utilizing an integrated aspect of the world is an easy way to break players' immersion, often replacing more native environmental aspects that could build things toward feeling even more real. And for a world as textured as Scorned, you'd think it would force that mindset to the forefront. Unfortunately, it doesn't do this as much as I'd like it to, which is frustrating because it does have good examples of using such a visceral art style in ways that benefit the gameplay. Even just showing off cool set pieces is a step in the right direction, which, as I mentioned already, Scorn does try to do. But those natural moments don't carry things far enough, and Scorn's focus quickly reveals a more distorted lens because of that. Puzzles, while a nice contributor to the horror game vibe, aren't as much of a success as they could be. The insistence on combat encounters is Scorn's other half, which initially leads to some pretty great ideas that aren't too tough to uncover. The enemy's malformed appearances wouldn't feel out of place in a Silent Hill game, perhaps with more of a science fiction twist, which isn't a bad thing, but the player is often given two options when encountering them: fight or run. This isn't anything new to horror games, and to Scorn's credit, it does feature the limited resources of the genre's forebears, where the decision to expend inventory is constantly tapping you on the shoulder, providing its own risks and rewards. Ammunition and health are rare, so there is the lingering panic and dread of running out of items when you need them most. The slow reload animations contribute to this feeling too, as it's tough to know for sure when you're going to be fully prepared for what's coming around the corner. Scorn successfully channels the inherent pressure of survival horror, cultivating plenty of anxiety between the battles. There are few moments as tense as hobbling on your last bit of health, steadily reloading your weapon, and taking out an enemy with your final bullet remaining. That surge of adrenaline is unreal. Still, the enemies end up being more frustrating than anything, as they lack inspiration in their designs and action patterns. They don't really echo the biotech nightmares of the environments, tending to adopt simple, fleshy structures with close or long-range attacks. The smaller enemies have a projectile attack with enormous range, while the larger ones lack mobility and often encourage you to simply run past them. The risk-reward element dissipates further with the tight, claustrophobic hallways, which are too cramped to run through, almost omitting your option of avoiding combat and forcing you to use your weapons. Whether or not that was intentional isn't entirely clear to me, but I can say with certainty that monsters didn't feel threatening in a way that would benefit Scorn's core artistry to its fullest. Regardless of what you end up fighting, the enemy encounters in Scorn break the pace of a world that absolutely drenches you in atmospheric expanse. While it never skimps on the gore and gorgeous art direction, the combat in Scorn is a pretty messy feature. I came out of Scorn very surprised, but for reasons that are difficult to fully convey. Its presentation is some of the most striking you'll find this generation, and in the times they happen, you will find gruesome and unsettling set pieces that will linger in your mind well after the game is over. Those moments, running across a scarred wasteland, seeing a giant creature and ripping its body open, being steadily consumed by some strange and oppressive monster, Scorn capitalizes on its noxious atmosphere, but also punctuates it with moments of refined horror. Beneath its surface, however, it's a weird patchwork of gameplay concepts that seem to react to each other in unexpected ways, concepts that would have flourished if it simply closed its fist and committed to what it really wants to be. And the more I think about it, that's really my greatest problem with Scorn. Keep in mind that despite everything I've said, I'm not out to rip Scorn apart and grind it down to dust. As negative as anyone might be toward it, the game honestly doesn't deserve that. As with any form of criticism, the goal is to provide feedback toward making something better, to seek an improved or even an ideal form, one that fulfills its goals and achieves its potential. But I'm very torn on what Scorn's ideal form should be. Removing combat would result in a more contemplative and immersive game, but it would also remove what is a firmly straight-ahead balance of tense resource management, a big component of some of the best horror games of all time. Refining the enemy encounters would have made for plenty of intensity for Scorn as a shooter, but it would trim away the moments of thought-provoking immersion, as the player would likely not have the opportunity to really bask in its universe. When looking in from the outside, Scorn's creative priorities are very hazy to me. I'm not certain what I can say to really guide anyone in a better direction with this game. It's a weird feeling for sure, because Scorn is filled to the bloody brim with potential. It could be either a richly thoughtful puzzle game that totally consumes the player, or a danger-filled horror landscape where every piece of ammunition counts. I won't say those two goals can't coexist, but all in all, it does shed a light on the could-have-beens of Scorn's ideal form, whatever that might be. As you can probably assume, this is a game that's stuck with me for quite a while, not because of its full-on successes or failures, but how its identity as an artistic artifact is constantly clouded before my eyes. Scorn as a game is very much like the Parasite's full assimilation of the protagonist, a misfeatured mass that doesn't really have much of a form to speak of, no signs to guide it toward a better existence. I wish I could help. I wish I could let it reach a complete state. And maybe that's the real horror behind Scorn, that without that guidance, that sense of perspective, you can't do anything. All you can do is observe and see what happens next.